What's up, teammates? Today, I want to have a short conversation about apologies and excuses and our reflexive actions related to them. So, someone once told me a long time ago about excuses, a quote kind of stuck with me, and it's that the excuse is for the person giving the excuse, not the person they're giving it to. So, making an excuse about something is typically not going to make the person you're apologizing to feel better. All excuses really do is make the person giving the excuse feel justified in whatever it is that they did, right? So, that was always a quote that kind of stuck with me because from a very young age, I had hit a point where apologies meant very little to me. I mean, very little, because I noticed that people just said sorry all the time, and like with tone and facial expressions that showed that they really didn't mean it, if that makes sense. So that's something I noticed all the time, particularly from my parents. And you guys know, if you follow me for any amount of time, how important I feel like it is that we model the type of behaviors we want our kids to express when they're older, when they're teens and adults, that we model that for them starting at a very, very young age. So I've done several podcast episodes in the past about different ways that I've tried to model this with my son. And, it all starts with recognizing when you made a mistake, when you did something wrong, and then giving a sincere apology. But the thing about apologies is people tend to just be reflexive about it. Like the reflex of just say, oh, I'm sorry, right? But that's not a real apology. Can we all agree on that? That someone just reflexively going, oh, I'm sorry. That's not really an apology. That's more just them trying to stop the conflict or end the conflict without actually making any headway into the mistakes that they made, right? So I think people just tend to be really, really reflexive when it comes to apologies. Like it just a sort of almost automatic. And that automatic feel to an apology makes it mean much, much less. So for example, there was a time when my son was younger and I lost my temper a little bit, and not particularly at him, but he was in the vicinity, and it scared him. I mean, and rightfully so. He was like 5 or 6 years old, and it scared him. And so the thing about apologies is it's more than just saying you're sorry. So of course I did that, but I recognized that that's not enough. It was never enough for me when I was young. Like saying you're sorry doesn't make up for the thing that you did. Does that make sense? Like just reflexively be like, oh, I'm sorry. Doesn't make up for the thing you did. It just tries to end the conflict where it's at. So apologies really need to have 3 parts to them, which is part of the story I'm telling you. Apologies first need to start with acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that what you did is something worth apologizing for, and that maybe you regret it, or maybe you have some, what's the word I'm looking for? That you're taking responsibility for whatever it is that you've done. So when it comes to my story, after I'd lost my temper, the first thing I did was acknowledge it. The first thing I did was sit down with my son and say, hey, buddy, I did not act right there. I didn't do the right thing. I jumped to conclusions. I made a mistake, and I lost my temper, and that was not right of me. So do you see how that establishes the concept of acknowledgement when we're talking about apologies? And you see how that already makes the conversation feel more intimate and meaningful before I've ever even given an apology than just saying, oh, I'm sorry, shouldn't have done it, whatever, right? That sort of reflexive response. So when I approach apologies, I usually don't apologize right away because I don't want it to come across as reflexive. So instead, I try to make sure that I'm following these 3 steps I'm talking about of how to make a sincere, good apology and how to model those apologies for your kids so that they're going to be more likely to model that behavior as they get older into their preteen, teen, and adult years. And it's not always going to sit right off the bat, right? But so the first step is acknowledgement. So in the story I was telling about my son, that was the first thing I did. Acknowledge specifically what I did wrong and that I did it wrong, and make 0 excuses about doing it. Because like I said, excuses are for the excuse giver to justify and feel better about what they did. They do nothing to make the person you're apologizing to feel better. So step 2 is taking responsibility. So I acknowledge that I did wrong. So the next step in my story is about taking responsibility. So that's where I say something like, yes, I was responsible for that, and I made a bad decision, and I messed up. So what I'm going to do, because I wronged you, is like, we're in martial arts. So what I did is I said, you get to keep my black belt. You get to hold on to my belt as if I lose my rank for as long as it takes until I've earned your trust again and until you feel safe around me again. And I've done this with other students too. You can have this until you feel safe around me, and then if I earn it back from you, you can give it back to me whenever you want. Now, I have a custom embroidered black belt made in the USA. It's like a $300 black belt. So this is like not giving away anything, something insubstantial. So again, step one, acknowledgement. Step two is taking responsibility. I took responsibility by not just saying I take responsibility in what I did wrong, but also giving a path forward, right? So I gave this path forward or asked for this path forward, I should say. I asked for this path forward of take this and let me have a chance to make it up to you, right? Then the third part of the apology, and probably the most important, is to actually change the behavior, is to actually attempt to do better as we go. What's up, young bird? Good to see you. Yeah, so the third part of the apology is to actually make changes to our behavior, changes to what we're doing, so that we can actually make it up to them. Now, you might notice that nowhere in those 3 steps of apologizing does it say to say you're sorry. And the reason I do it that way is because we have become so reflexive about saying I'm sorry that it has lost all meaning to a lot of people. The phrase I'm sorry has lost a lot of meaning. And if I am going to use a phrase like that, I try to say something like I apologize. But that's all part of acknowledgement. You don't just say I apologize. You might say something, and I never start with that, because let me give you an example. If I say, well, I'm sorry for losing my temper, kind of sounds like I'm defending losing my temper, and I'm just frustrated at you, right? That I'm just frustrated because you were upset by my temper. But if I change that and I say, man, I lost my temper, I shouldn't have done that, my apologies, or I'm sorry. Now, do you see how putting that at the end changed the tone of it? So now it sounds more organic, sounds more realistic, it sounds more from the heart, a little bit more intimate. See what I'm saying? So, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I always like to have conversations with y'all about this. I see Young Bird watching on YouTube. Glad to have you, right? And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about not just apologies, but how to model proper apologies with your kids so that they'll be more likely to model that behavior back in the future. And we talk about this in my kids' classes all the time, that saying sorry is not enough. You also need to take responsibility, state specifically what you did wrong, and then give a plan to change that behavior moving forward and make it up to the person that you would be apologizing to or wronged. That's what a full apology is, right? And I've always tried my best, and I've always made mistakes too, but I've always tried my best to model this concept of apologizing with my son. And he's old enough now that he recognizes that if someone just says, well, I'm sorry for eating your food, that it comes across as disingenuous and that it doesn't really help heal the relationship. Instead, it just sounds like I'm only saying I'm sorry to end a conflict, but my tone says that I'm accusing you of starting the conflict, even though I was the one that did the thing wrong. So we were reflexive, like, well, I'm sorry for whatever, it comes across sarcastic. So if we want our kids to be able to apologize when they do something wrong appropriately, because our kids are going to do wrong stuff. They're going to wrong people. It's going to happen. We do it too, right? So the way to get that going is to show them this 3-step process. First, acknowledge exactly what you did wrong, right? And make no excuses. Make no excuses. Try not to give any justification. I'm not saying don't give context around it, right? You can give context like, I lost my temper. I shouldn't have done that. I saw this thing going on, and it's not right that I lost my temper. It just kind of got to me. And so I'm not making an excuse. I'm just providing context. Does that make sense? And then the second one is taking responsibility. So I take responsibility for what I did. That is my responsibility. I am going to make it up to you. Here's how I'm going to make it up to you. And then the third step is actually making up, is the change. So I think in the story I gave you where I lost my temper and my son was nearby and it scared him, I started off, like I said, with acknowledging that I shouldn't have done that, acknowledging that I made a mistake. Then I offered to make it up to him, but also asked for a pathway to redemption, right? By giving him something that meant a lot to me and telling him I would earn it back from him. And then across the next several weeks, it was all about changing that behavior and catching myself right before I started to get frustrated or lose my temper. Now, this also works the other way around. So let's say, for example, your kid has done something wrong, right? And you are mad about it. right? And you want to get onto them and all that. And of course, you should let them know what they did wrong, but you can kind of follow the same 3-step process, right? Step one, acknowledgement. Buddy, you really shouldn't do things like this thing that you did. Can you understand how this can be hurtful to me or to whoever else was involved? I mean, how would you feel if this was something that I had done, or something like that? So that's acknowledgement. That's me and you now trying to acknowledge what it is that we have issue with, where our conflict resides, right? Step two, taking responsibility. So this is where you go, hey man, I know you did this. I just need you to admit to it because I want to still be able to trust you. I want the honesty to still be there. And then the most important part of this taking responsibility part is offering a pathway to redemption. Because if a kid just thinks they're going to get punished, period, and they're going to get yelled at or whatever it is, they're not going to want to take that responsibility. So what I do is I'll try to get them to acknowledge they did something wrong. Then when it comes to the taking responsibility, I will give them a pathway to make it up to me. Like, look, man, this thing you did was wrong. It really hurt me. It really bothered me. But if you're willing to take responsibility, if you're willing to admit that it might not have been the right thing to do, then how about we do this? If you unload the dishwasher for me 3 times this week, then I'll let it go and we'll be good. I just need to trust that you'll do what I say. I need to be able to trust you, in the household. And this is a way of earning back my trust. So when your child messes up, acknowledgement, but give them a pathway to redemption. Let them know something specific that they can do to make it up to you so that they will end up avoiding being in trouble. Now, then, of course, if that doesn't happen, then consequences, right? Consequences for those actions. But always try to give a pathway to redemption before you hit the consequences phase, right? Which is where you follow through with your boundary. I mean, if you guys follow me long enough, when you're working with kids, we also want to model setting boundaries. And one of those things is clearly outlining the rules, right? And clearly outlining the consequences to breaking those rules before the rules are broken. Don't wait till the rules are broken to outline the consequences. Outline the consequences before the rules are broken, right? But before we get to consequences when your kid messes up, first, acknowledge to them that you feel that they've done something wrong. Second, offer them a path to redemption without ever ending up in trouble. Look, this broke my trust in you, and so I need you to do X for a week so that you can prove to me that I can trust you, and then we'll just move on from this. And then if that doesn't happen, then we move on to the consequences. So you see how this apology concept can work on both sides, right? So if I'm the one that wronged and I need to do an apology, just like I said at the first part of this whole video, I would start off with the acknowledgement that I did wrong, taking responsibility for what I did and offering a way to make it up to them, a pathway forward, and then actually changing that behavior moving forward, right? But the same thing can be if I was wronged by a child or somebody else, then we can start off with me acknowledging why I feel wronged, and then asking them, can you understand where I'm coming from? Can you understand why I feel wronged by that behavior? Then offer them a pathway to redemption, as in, hey, that was really not nice. Okay, would you, or sorry, I got kind of sidetracked. I heard something beside me. Acknowledgement, hey, can you see why that thing wronged me? Taking responsibility, that could be offering the pathway forward. Maybe they forgot to take out the trash. So I'm just going to go with a simple one. So then I say, all right, so to make that up for me, I need you to not only take out the trash, I'm also going to need you to take everything out of the fridge and scrub the fridge this weekend. That, in my mind, will let me trust in you and your ability to handle your responsibilities again. And if you do that, then we're good. We'll put this behind us. No problem. I won't keep bringing it up. It won't be an issue anymore. And then, of course, if that doesn't happen, then we move on to the consequences of the action, whatever consequence you gave when you first established the rule, as in, hey, if you don't do this, that you don't get to do this, or if you don't do this, then I'm not going to spend much time playing with you, or if you, right, like there's so many examples that I'm kind of having trouble picking an example out of the crowd to use, but I hope you guys can understand what I'm talking about. And I've also already touched in this podcast, and I've done it specifically as a topic in others, about respecting boundaries and setting boundaries, right? So anytime you want your kids to behave in a certain way, step one is modeling that behavior. So if you want them to earn your trust back from you when they wrong you, then you have to acknowledge that and model that behavior when you've wronged them, while also giving them a pathway to redemption, just like you would hope someone would give you if you wronged somebody and felt bad about it. Now, respecting and setting boundaries, that's I like getting into the topic about respect, because respect is one of those iffy ones. I actually had a big debate earlier this week about discipline, because dictionaries always give multiple definitions to words, and even dictionaries will tell you that they do not strive to be the resource that sets what words mean, but instead they strive to be a resource that explains all the different ways society uses a word. Does that make sense? So respect is one of those funny ones that has a lot of sort of interplay between its definitions. So when I'm talking about respecting boundaries, what I'm talking about is paying special attention to those boundaries and not crossing those lines. We say the same thing we're doing respecting class. We always say, you don't have to like something to respect it. But for example, if you're going to cross the road, you got to look for cars both ways, right? Because you respect the fact that a car could do some real damage to you. You pay special attention to the danger in the situation. And that is also a way that we use the term respect. So that's how I'm using it here when referencing boundaries. So when you're setting boundaries, remember, it's always about letting them know where the line in the sand is, and letting them know the consequences if they cross that line in the sand. So when you're setting household rules for your kids, it's just like setting boundaries. You set the rule, and then you provide the consequences for that rule. Now, if this is a first-time offense and you never even thought to set that rule, then I think a lecture could do it, right? Instead of punishing your kid, depending on how bad it is, I think a lecture would be just fine. Give them a little lecture, be like, okay, well, we never established this as a rule, so I understand why you messed up, but we're establishing it as a rule now. And if this goes forward in the future, X is going to be the consequence to breaking said rule, if that makes sense. So setting boundaries and setting rules is almost the same thing, but you have to make sure you don't just tell them what's expected, but you also tell them what will happen if they move away from what is expected. And then, like I say, apologies, this whole concept comes down to those boundaries, right? And we have to, so if we want our kids to respect our rules and our boundaries, we also have to respect theirs within reason. So for example, I know that as kids get older and older, they start craving a little bit more autonomy. They crave a little bit more independence and things like that. And of course, you as a parent, you can only do so much in those things within reason, but it's important to kind of help them through that and help them foster that. So sometimes your kid might reach a certain age and they might give you some type of boundary. For example, I know my son at a pretty young age set a boundary around tickling and sat us down and was like, I don't want to be tickled. I don't like to be tickled. I don't want this to happen to me anymore. And it's like, okay, well now if we want him to respect our boundaries and rules, then we need to respect that boundary. That is a reasonable boundary for a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid to set. And then we can respect that boundary moving forward, right? And kids don't know how to set a boundary in terms of giving a consequence in the way that adults do. But if they ask, something reasonable like that, it's important that we respect that boundary. That way, they're more likely to respect our boundaries when we set rules in the future, right? And then again, anything you want your kids to act like as they're teens, adults, otherwise, you've got to model that behavior with them when they're young as much as humanly possible. So I'm just going to end with one more quick recap. Don't reflexively apologize, because people will roll their eyes. You say, well, I'm sorry for whatever, or I'm sorry, just the simple I'm sorry. I know every time I hear something like that, I just want to roll my eyes. Like it annoys the crap out of me, because all that really means these days, in the way most people use it in society, it doesn't really mean an apology. It just means I'm sorry you got upset at me. And it's not really an apology. It's not really taking responsibility. It's not really an admission of what they've done. It's simply I'm sorry you got your feelings hurt. And that escalates and causes conflict, which is why simply saying I'm sorry is one way that often can escalate a situation. So when you actually want to model apologies to your kids, or you want them to know how to apologize correctly or intimately or in a meaningful way, then follow this 3-step system. Acknowledgement, taking responsibility and give them a path to succeed or path to redemption, and then change the behavior. But that means you have to do the same thing, right? That if you mess up, let's say you raised your voice and then later realized that the thing you were raising your voice about didn't even happen, or that you misunderstood the situation, because that happens. Parents, come on, we sometimes we get onto our kids and then don't give them really a chance to explain, and then an hour later they kind of like, well, this is what happened, and then you realize, oh, I didn't have context on the situation, and I messed up. I probably shouldn't have raised my voice about that, or whatever it is, right? So the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that you shouldn't have done what you did, right? I should not have raised my voice, and for that I do apologize. So never say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have raised my, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have raised my voice, versus, I really shouldn't have raised my voice, I apologize. Do you see how those two completely sound differently tone-wise, right? One sounds almost sarcastic, defensive, and sort of puts a wall up. The second one sounds a little bit more intimate and like we're having a conversation about it and things like that. So then that's the acknowledgement. Then take responsibility. I shouldn't have done X. I shouldn't have raised my voice, whatever it is. And can I have a path to redemption? What if I promise not to raise my voice at you for a whole week, and if I do, I owe you ice cream? Look, you can get creative with that part. Like, you can get really creative with that. With me, like I said in my story, I gave my black belt, my expensive one, to my son and told him I'd earn it back from him. Heck, I've done the same thing with like a PlayStation controller. Like, here, I'm going to give you my favorite PlayStation controller. When you think I've earned it back, you let me know. And what do I need to earn it back? Oh, you just, want me to give you hugs and stay calm and whatever? Okay, I can do that, right? And then follow that path to redemption and actually change the situation. That's the 3 steps to apologizing. So give it a try. Maybe it changes the conflicts you're having in your life with a spouse or a significant other or a child or a boss or a coworker. Give it a shot. Try being more, I don't want to use the term intimate again, but try being more meaningful with the way that you apologize, and it will fix many relationships in your life. So until I see you guys again, be the best teammates you can be, and be the best at being you.